Hello and welcome back to Retro Ranger. I'm excited to talk about rhythm games today for some of the various platforms, and it's an interesting genre as they really just didn't exist much before the PlayStation era. These days it feels like there's a new one released every month, and for this reason I'm not going to be covering the Just Dance, the Guitar Hero, or the Rock Band series. Everybody's already played these, of course. However, there is a plethora of other rhythm games to explore, so let's dive in. First up is Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. This rhythm-based entry into the Kingdom Hearts series takes the player on a journey through themes and stages from the various games or Disney movies, pulling the appropriate songs to match. You run on this musical staff as you and your party attempt to attack enemies and dodge projectiles in timing with the music. Each party member can attack either individually or in sync with other members, both of which will usually be required within the same song. Your timing with attacks is of course important considering the genre, and how precise you are drives points. When you fail to hit an enemy, they will deal damage to you, which is tracked in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. When your HP hits 0, you've failed the song and you need to retry. Whether or not you like the music will be directly tied to your love or hatred of the Disney songs, but the quality is fantastic, and while the early songs were a little bit on the boring side, it's not long before you get into some classics like the Halloween Town from Nightmare Before Christmas. After completing a stage, you will get stars based on your rating, which will help you unlock future stages. While the gating is forcing some linear aspects, you can choose the order of which you progress for what's currently unlocked, and there's usually a good offering once you get past the first lock. Certain stages, when completed, present you with a cutscene that retells the entire story from the Kingdom Hearts series. Since this is the 14th entry in the series, there is a lot of story to be told, but I'm curious of who this was for. If you're playing a rhythm game based on this universe, I would imagine you either know it already, or if you're interested in it, being told this story isn't really the best way to experience. I mean, this story is from games after all. Either way, the cutscenes summarize well, and I guess if nothing else, can remind you of the arc. Difficulty-wise, this game is split into 3 categories, and the songs do a good job of adhering to these levels. The controls are on the simpler side, so it won't be long before you have a bit of muscle memory build up to start cranking through and upping the difficulty. There are a lot of stages. Wow. Some stages have multiple songs too, which means there's a lot of content to play through, which is nice, but I wonder who has the appetite to complete all of it. Also worth mentioning that some of the stages will feature a guest star, like Aladdin in his respective stage, for example. While this is interesting, they behave exactly like the characters that they replace, so beyond just the variation, there's not a ton of purpose here. Overall, this game was really well produced and it has a lot of polish. You're showered with unlockables everywhere, so there's a strong feeling of progression and it's really well implemented. I enjoyed this title even if it's a bit on the simple side with regards to the controls. Let's move on, though, to the next game on our list. Okay, next up is PaRappa The Rapper for the PlayStation 1.
Into the bowl. Crack, crack the egg into the bowl. Crack, crack the egg into the bowl. M-I-X the flour into the bowl. M-I-X the flour into the bowl. Baking a cake, yes, means you...
This is technically the remastered version for the PlayStation 4 that they completed in 2017, but it remains almost identical to the original outside of adding a widescreen aspect ratio during the stages and some small graphic updates. You play as a rapping dog named PaRappa who goes on a journey to improve himself by learning new things through rapping mentors. Stage 1, for example, PaRappa encounters a bully and he needs to learn how to defend himself, so he learns martial arts from a rapping onion dojo master.
Kick, punch, block. Chop, kick, block. chop, kick, block, 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 block.
Walk back and kick it.
Block, kick,
Block the punch.
block, dot, punch.
Later in this story, he needs to learn how to drive to impress his friends and to provide transport to the beach, so he learns driver's education through a rapping moose.
Step on the gas. Step on the gas. Step on the brakes. Step on the brakes. Now step on the gas. Step on the gas, gas, gas.
Say boom, boom, boom. You say bam, bam, bam. No pause in between. Come on, let's jam. Step on the gas.
The story is campy and hilarious with exaggerated characters and in some really silly situations. There's a lot of charm with this game, which led to it being incredibly popular when it first came out in the 90s. While some have said that this doesn't quite hold up, I'd have to disagree on all accounts. The light-hearted and overall fun theme, music, and art style all make for a really good experience, regardless if you've played the remastered version or the original. Let's talk about the gameplay now. Being one of the earliest rhythm games, PaRappa uses the music timing track at the top of the screen to know what to press and when. Songs will all follow a similar pattern of the rapping mentor for the stage delivering a line, and then it's the player's chance to match it.
Need is to be nice and friendly.
All you ever need is to be nice and friendly.
All you ever need is to be nice and friendly.
The controls are rather intuitive, as is the timing meter, which really makes the game really approachable. Expected inputs will be the 4 face buttons on the PlayStation controller in addition to the R1 and L1 on the top. How good you rap in return is measured on the category track, which is on the right side of the screen, starting with you rapping good and moving up or down throughout the stage based on your performance. If you do worse when you're already on awful, you'll fail the stage and be forced to restart. One great mechanic is that the song and the entire stage environment actually reacts to your rapping skills. Dropping from good to bad on the driving stage, for instance, will cause the car to start swerving all over the road. Each stage has a unique state for each performance category, and there's plenty of hidden gems within. PaRappa the Rapper was breaking new ground as a genre, and funny enough, the developer and publisher debated if this was even qualified as a game originally. When it did release, it made a surprise splash, and Sony of America actually made an exception to their no 2D games policy to release this, given its growing popularity in Japan. If you've never played this, you might be scratching your head a bit, but it's definitely worth a look, as you'll be laughing and rapping along with the songs in no time. Let's move on, though, to the next game on our list.
The pump over here comes with the truck.
Oh yes, I had a lot of fun. I meet a lot of bucks and now I'm on the run. In the rain or in the snow.
In the rain or in the snow.
Got the funky flow.
Got the funky flow.
Okay, this is Gitaroo Man Lives for the Sony PSP. Here you play as a young boy whose name is U-1, as he attempts to show up a bully and win the heart of a girl through his skateboarding skills. His dog Puma, however, has a different plan for the boy, as it turns out he's of the legendary line of the Gitaroo Warriors.
You are of the Gitaroo Man bloodline, inheritor of the legendary Gitaroo. If you can collect all of the Gitaroos, you'll gain great powers and...
Puma, I have other plans.
Huh?
I'm gonna practice my skateboarding and Pico's gonna be like, wow, you're so cool!
If you live in your dreams, you got no future, you won.
When Puma transforms U1 into the Gitaroo Man, he becomes clad in armor and has his Gitaroo weapon, which is essentially a guitar that can attack. And he'll need to do that as the game's core element is taking on stage bosses through the power of rock. In between the boss fights, you get cutscenes like PaRappa the Rapper that stitch together an overall story.
Sir? The legendary Gitaroo inside Flango's body.
Sir! Sir, it's been taken!
Listen up.
Sir! Yes, sir!
We have lost 2 Gitaroos already.
The rhythm sections of the game are pretty interesting and include multiple phases for each song. Both you and the boss have health bars at the top of the screen, though you typically don't actually start with full health. Thankfully, there is a charge phase of the song that lets you refill your health meter, but also an attack phase that damages your opponent. During both of these phases, you're using the analog stick to match the moving music line and pushing and holding the buttons to the corresponding indicators. This combination of inputs is nice and engaging, and failing to do either will result in a miss for the note. Of course, that the stage boss can also attack, and this means you need to guard. During this phase, you'll get notes in the form of face buttons moving across the screen, and your goal here is to press the corresponding button as it crosses the midpoint of the intersecting music lines. Failing to do so will cause damage to you, and if you run out of health, of course, you fail the stage. The music is a strong aspect of the game, and while not memorable, it is fitting to the guitar theme, and it's generally fun to play along to. Overall, this is another campy rhythm game, and it's funny to think that it's such a common aspect in the genre. Either way, this is a fun way to jam out on the go, and this is a great mobile entry out of the PSP. Let's move on, though, to the next game.
You want right? Not that way!
Okay, next up we have a rhythm game on the Game Boy Advance. This is Rhythm Tengoku, or as it's known outside of Japan, Rhythm Heaven Silver. And while this is a Japan exclusive release, it did spawn a few sequels internationally that would later take on the name Rhythm Heaven. Here, I'm playing a fan-translated version that was later made and printed onto a real cartridge. In this game, you take on a series of rhythm-based minigames that all bring a unique theme to the table. And while we've seen some really wacky and quirky themes, this one might take the cake. The themes range from hitting baseballs into space at different camera perspectives, marching in beat as a soldier, karate chopping flower pots and light bulbs, plucking chin whiskers off of onion faces, and so much more. While some are straightforward like the soldier marching, the others can be really strange. The baseball hitting stage, for instance, will pan close to this alien bopping to the beat, but then as the camera pans back out, you randomly have a rabbit head. The camera will then zoom out really far and you'll get this really cool depth of perception going on, but then to find that your head has changed once again to this red ball thing when you come back. It doesn't end there either. At the end of each minigame, you get graded on your performance, which will usually be quantified as okay or superb, which all makes sense, but then other times you get feedback like, your performance was like a breakfast. How do I interpret that? What was included in this breakfast? Was there bacon? I mean, don't leave me hanging. This is possibly the most bizarre grading format I've ever seen, but I can't tell if I'm in love or I detest it. The controls are really basic, and it's usually just having you press the A button and timing with the beats. Sometimes the D-pad gets involved to mix it up or help you when the beats get faster, though some minigames like the whisker pulling will often require you to alternate between the presses and holds for the A button. These pesky curly hairs require holding the tweezers as it gives you some of that stubborn struggle. Beyond that, this game is perhaps worth playing solely for its out there concepts, as you're not likely to leave with any of the songs stuck in your head, but rather I'm guessing some of the imagery will. It's a light and fun addition to the portable console, and it's a nice addition to our list, of course. Let's move on to something a bit more rockin'. Okay, next up we have Gal Metal for the Nintendo Switch. This game is a wacky and fun take on the music rhythm genre in a good way. You play as a schoolgirl that apparently really loves metal, and through some of the strange events, another boy's consciousness is somehow transferred into you, making for some funny dialogue between them both. Connected here to this story is that Earth faces extinction from aliens who just hate the music we blast into space. Our only line of defense is, of course, to rock out so hard that it deflects their attacks. You know, pretty standard stuff. The story elements are presented in a few ways, though this comic book styling is perhaps the most prevalent, alongside some scrolling text messages between bandmates. While I really enjoy that there is some story here to move you from stage to stage, they do start to overstay their welcome a bit before too long. Moving on to the rhythm part of the game, you're the band's drummer, and you use the Joy-Cons as drumsticks, mimicking the motion to the beat. I will say that the Joy-Cons registering the swings wasn't perfect, and I did find it frustrating at a few points since it's so crucial to the gameplay. I tried a few different Joy-Cons as well just to make sure it wasn't the ones I was using, but no luck. Unlike a lot of the rhythm games, there's no strict timing enforcement, and it's really free form. In fact, one criteria you're graded on is creativity. While the game will provide you with some beats, you don't have to stick with them and are encouraged to mix them up. Of course, having good timing in general plays a part, and you'll pass or fail based on your overall score. In between gigs, you'll see yet another gameplay mechanic, and this is a simulation where you choose how to spend your time. Kind of think Persona without the relationship building, and you have a finite amount of time to work, practice, or do whatever you want to benefit you in different ways. While the story is silly and fun, the rhythm part didn't entice me enough to play past 4 or 5 gigs roughly. While I can appreciate the freeform nature of it, I think I prefer my rhythm games with a bit more feedback on how I'm doing. Let's keep moving. Okay, next up is Donkey Kong Jungle Beat for the Nintendo GameCube. Alright, this is an interesting mix-up as it's a bit of a diversion from our pure rhythm-based games, and it blends in some of the action platformer into our mix. It uses a unique bongo controller that's used for a few other rhythm games that I can't show you for fear of copyright takedown, but it recognizes each bongo drum separately as well as clapping since the controller is equipped with a microphone. In this game, you play as Donkey Kong, who traverses 2.5D side-scrolling platform stages, not unlike other games featuring the character. What's different here, though, is how you control him, as you need to use the bongo. Tapping the right bongo drum will move DK right and left for the left drum. Tapping both of them together will make him jump, and claps are used to do various things like grabbing these sling monkeys. Also in the controls is wall jumping, which you can pull off by alternating the bongo hits back and forth. This is awkward in the beginning, but it's surprising that it doesn't take long to set in before you just know it and you'll be clearing stages without even thinking about the bongos. After a few stages, you're met with a menacing boss to take down. These fights are all unique and a fun break from the stages. They're all appropriately challenging that you have mastery of the controls by incorporating most of the movement mechanics in the course of a single fight. As you traverse the stages, your goal is to collect bananas which go into your barrel indicator in the upper left-hand corner. If you take damage, you lose some of your bananas, acting as your hit points in a way. At the end of each of the stages, the amount of bananas you were able to secure earns you gold, silver, and bronze tiers of medals, which are in turn used to unlock more stages for progression. The graphics are colorful and bright, with great layouts and design to keep the action going, and it's fun from start to finish. One letdown is the music, which just blends into the background way more than it should in a rhythm-based game, even if it is a mixture of other genres. At one point, I had to go back to the footage and just confirm that there was music. I think that if this would have been able to somehow tie in the wonderful stage design with the music, this could have easily been a must-have for the system. Sadly, that's not the case, but we are still left with a surprisingly fun title that achieves way more than a controller gimmick that I think a lot of people understandably assumed it lived and died by. The controller and the game are both thankfully still affordable, so if you've been ignoring this one for fear of a letdown, perhaps add this one to your list to check out. Let's move on though to the next game on our list. Okay, here's a strange one. This is Jung Rhythm for the Sega Saturn. This is a Japanese-only rhythm game that exclusively makes up the music and rhythm genre for the system. You play as a young schoolgirl who meets some interesting characters, but that's about as much as I can pick up since I don't speak any Japanese. It follows the typical pattern of cutscenes followed by a rhythm section and then repeats over and over. The cutscenes appear to be really random. Well, again, I don't speak the language. To understand what's going on, I have a hard time imagining what could be going on to justify some of the visuals here. The rhythm sections have a meter at the bottom of the screen and behaves very similar to PaRappa The Rapper, where the opponent goes first, then you get a chance to repeat it. There's a wow and a boo meter on the left, which gives you one of either of these ratings after each input section. However, it does seem random. Too often do you get confusing feedback. You get wows for bad timing or boos for exact matches, for instance. If you get too many boos in a single round, you'll fail the stage immediately. At the end of each stage, you'll get rated by judges, and you need to earn a total score of 350 or more to move on. Otherwise, you'll be forced to retry. Here's the downfall of the game, as I can't make heads or tails of the scoring criteria, and it honestly just feels, again, random. I got stuck on the second stage, and I had to do this about 13 or 14 times before I actually was able to stumble upon a super strange scoring bug. At least I think it's a bug. During each song, there'll be an ad-lib section where you can put in any inputs you want. If you spam and mash buttons as fast as possible for these parts, the judges go banana for this, and it's almost a guaranteed means to get a passing score. It's comical how bad you can do on the song, but if you just mash buttons for those parts, you'll still pass. Overall, it's a shame this is the only game in the genre for the Saturn because this is bad. The silver lining maybe is that it's so bad you'll have a fun time laughing at its expense. My son and I were in stitches trying to figure out how the judges work and trying to understand the context of these cutscenes. And at the end of the day, right, if you can still have a good time, that's what gaming's all about. But maybe just stick to some of the better ones than this. Let's move on. Next up is Cadence of Hyrule for the Nintendo Switch. This is a mashup of Crypt the Necrodancer, a previously released Rogue Rhythm game, and The Legend of Zelda. Players choose to control either Link or Zelda, though you can switch between them during the game, and from there, you're just moving to the beat of the songs. Those songs are great renditions of Zelda's well-known compositions and usually feature a more prominent guitar sound that can really make for some rockin' tracks. The main mechanic, as mentioned, is that all the movement is matched to the beat of the song, which has a helpful meter at the bottom of the screen. In addition to movement, all attacks happen within that same rhythm, so dodging enemies, positioning your attacks, and landing blows all happen to the soundtrack in a well-orchestrated manner. Once you've been able to clear the screen of enemies, the beat meter goes away and you're able to move at any pace you want. Speaking of screens, though, the map layout is randomly generated for each new game that you play, though the tiles themselves seem to be static. It's just that the arrangement of the overworld changes. Many notable locations will be found from Zelda, and it would include things like the Lake Hyrule, Hyrule Castle, Death Mountain, and more. Also from the series is recognizable weapons and items that you can pick up, like bombs, the boomerang, the hookshot, and more. The art, music, really make this game stand out, and it's definitely one I'd recommend playing at some point. The difficulty can be high in the beginning, especially if you're learning to maneuver yourself and set up for attacks for specific enemies. Just be prepared to die. A lot. But it won't be terribly long before you've gotten the hang of it and you're clearing screens more easily. Scattered around the map are stones that you can activate, which act as resurrection points, and it reduces the pain of death, which will later be teleportation points that you can find once you have the loot. The ultimate goal here is to find 4 instruments scattered amongst the 4 dungeons and take down the bosses. I was impressed with this title, and it really felt true to both games it spawned from, though by the end, when you have the final fight with Ganon, you'll swear it's just another entry into the Zelda series, which, of course, is more than fine. If you've not yet played Cadence of Hyrule, consider doing so even if rhythm games aren't your forte. Okay, there's our tour of some of the lesser-known rhythm games across the different platforms. I thought I'd spare you the visuals of watching me play Beat Saber, but I'm curious to know which ones you were hoping to see on the list. The one that really surprised me was actually Cadence of Hyrule, as it didn't pull me in the first time I played it a few years ago, but when I came back to it for this episode, I just couldn't put it down until I finished it. Anyways, let me know which rhythm games are your favorite to play, or maybe you just hate the whole genre either way. Let me know down in the comments down below. And until next time, of course, thank you for watching Retro Ranger.